Now you had a experience that I remember you telling me about. Do you mind talking about the glass?
Oh no, I'll tell that story, and you know, because for a long time I didn't talk about it because it was so weird and I didn't have any explanation for it at all. Um, I don't know quite how to where the story starts, but it I was alone at my house in Burlington, and I knew I was alone. There was no question that I was by myself there. Um, and I heard this high pitched whining sound. Is this the story, Jayson? Is this the one where? Yeah.
Yep.
I heard this high pitched whining sound, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and I thought maybe it was a smoke alarm, but I checked the smoke alarms. It wasn't that, and then I thought maybe it's a car alarm. So I got up and walked across the living room to the window so I could look out and see if there was a car with lights flashing and alarm blasting, but it wasn't that either. But walking across the dining room put me right beside the kitchen, and I could tell that the sound was coming from the kitchen. So I went in, and I was living alone, and I'm not particularly a good housekeeper, and I had a lot of dirty dishes on the sink counter, and I noticed that one of the glasses, a French tumbler, was kind of a French tumbler, looks kind of like a jelly glass, was moving all by itself, and I couldn't figure out what was moving it. I thought, if the dishwasher were running, it might be vibrating and causing the glass to spin. And it was not only moving, but it started spinning, and it was spinning really fast. And it was the spinning glass that was producing a noise, apparently. So I just stared at it, probably with my mouth hanging open and just totally dumbfounded. And all of a sudden, as I'm staring at this glass, it just flew to pieces. It just exploded. And it kind of puts you in mind of those old Memorex commercials. Is it real or is it Memorex? Where they've got
Wow.
an opera singer singing to a wine glass until the wine glass explodes.
Mm-hmm.
It was like that, and it was somewhat frightening because it was only that
Yeah.
one glass, although there was a lot of other things on the counter, and it flew. I mean, I was finding pieces of it for weeks afterwards. It just flew apart as if it I don't know, as if it just exploded, which is what it did. But the peculiar thing was it didn't leave like shards of glass. The whole thing broke up into little squares of glass, about the size of your thumbnail,
Hmm.
roughly. Um, and I was finding them all over for a long time after that. And
Wow.
I couldn't figure out what had done it. Nothing like that ever happened before. I couldn't apply any sort of scientific method to it because to study something using the scientific method, it has to be repeatable, and it wasn't. It never was. And I had the comforting part of the story. I mean, it didn't frighten me to the degree I wanted to move out or anything. It just frightened me because I didn't have any explanation, and that's frightening. But my next door neighbor is a scientist, and I went over and told him about it, not knowing quite what to expect, other than that he had known me for a long time and he knew I wasn't any kind of a bullshitter. And I told him what happened, and he came over and took a look around, and he just said, sometimes things happen and then they don't happen again, and so you can't study them.
Hmm.
And that's the explanation that makes me most comfortable. I like that. So holding on to that one. And
Uh,
I tell that story, and I've never had anyone else who's experienced that. It's just a
yeah.
mystery.
Yeah,
That's
that is
wild.
really unique. for sure.
Yeah. With
Yeah.
the
I'll
But I
be
explosion.
right
saw
back.
it happen. That's the other weird thing. I mean,
I'll be
it
right
didn't
back.
happen while I was in the living room. It
I gotta
happened
check
while I
on
was
Luke.
staring at it.
Oh, he'll be right back.
I thought he just found that too terrifying, I guess. The other interesting story happened here in this town where I live now in Vermont. It's a small town, very much like the one I grew up in. And back in the 1950s, there was a house here owned by a medical doctor and his family. And one day in October, it just started filling up with water. The flat surfaces, like the flat surface of the piano, was covered with water. The floor was covered with water. The carpets were soaked. Dishes in the kitchen cabinets were discovered to be full of water. And no one could determine where this water was coming from. And it went on for about a month, I guess. They had in all sorts of experts. They had the first person they called, of course, was a plumber, and he shut off all the water to the house, not just he shut it off from the street, so no water was even coming into the house, and it would still continue to fill glasses. And that the doctor talked about how he would walk from the kitchen to the living room with a bowl of grapes. And by the time he got to the living room, the bowl would have filled up with water right in front of his eyes.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that weird? I mean, it's not menacing in any way. It's just weird. It's menacing because it challenges our reliable reality. He had to move out of the house. He and the family moved. They got a trailer, as we used to call them, mobile homes now, and they put it in the front yard, and they moved into that. And whatever it was that was filling the house with water didn't follow them. I like to tell this story to the kids too, and I like to ask them, well, what do you think the name of the doctor was? And they'll never guess, of course, that his name was Dr. Waterman. So, I mean,
weird.
it's as if this cosmic joker, or whatever it is that causes this stuff, has sort of a sense of humor, and that's the punchline, Dr. Waterman. And it is a very, very weird story. My a friend of mine here in town, his father was the plumber who was called by Dr. Waterman to check the house. And apparently this plumber, was very religious, Roman Catholic sort of guy. And apparently what was happening in that house really troubled him for the rest of his life, because he couldn't figure it out.
Because he couldn't figure out how to explain it.
He couldn't explain it. And he had he had to get a plumber's license, so he had to apprentice. He had to be a plumber for a long time, and he never encountered water behaving like that. So it troubled him. It actually troubled him. I guess it was somehow in conflict with his Roman Catholic upbringing. I don't understand quite how, but apparently it did. It just, I mean, if wine can turn into blood, then why not? Well, anyway.
Water in the middle of a room. Yeah. I feel like I guess it would bother me not being able to explain it, but it wouldn't be troubling. It would just be like, I wish you could get to the bottom of this.
It'd be a persistent irritation. And there are stories, the cultural appetite right now is for demons and horrific encounters that make great horror movies. But, and that's fun. That's sort of recreational. But the stuff that happens usually isn't that malignant. The stuff that happens is usually pretty subtle, but troubling. And I think both of those are, my glass story and the water story are both examples of how things can be, kind of subtly troubling, but not really menacing.
Did you guys start talking about politics?
We haven't yet.
No,
What?
that's not so
De-
subtle and very
demons?
menacing.
Demons in horrific situations that are not malignant.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But I know what you mean. I've even had, like, I have stories that things that have happened to me that just you can't explain, and it's just the most bizarre thing, and not really menacing, but again, just like, what the hell was that? And there's
Yeah.
no way
Like
to
what?
explain
Yeah.
it.
What happened?
So when I was young, and in like high school and college and stuff, there were these abandoned mental hospitals in my town where I grew up. And of course, like, what did all the young people do? Let's go in the old mental hospital. And they were like condemned, but you could still find a way to get into them. And so that is what we did. And the bizarre thing about them was that they just closed them, but they left everything, like including patient records and all the equipment. Yeah, so nobody decided to just remove that stuff. So we would go in and read patient records and look at like their Christmas cards and decorations. And if you look up the place, like, it was called Rosewood, and there's definitely some troubling history behind it, and people were mistreated. And so who knows?
Where is it?
In Maryland, in Reisterstown, Maryland. And now they've since torn them all down, which was very sad for us because we just liked knowing that it was there. But yeah, I would go in with people, and sometimes bizarre things would then happen. Sometimes they'd happen there, and sometimes they would happen at my house, like after. So, and it's weird because nothing really happened to me when I go by myself or other people, but I had this one ex that, like, the bizarre just seemed to be attracted to him. So he went in there, and he comes back to the house, and then for days, like, just unexplained, the doors popping open, the front door, even when it's locked, and like, just things are moving, and the animals, I had a cat and a rabbit at the time, and they're behaving very strangely. The rabbit's stomping his foot and looking up like he's looking at something, and he's afraid. That cat's hiding in a way that she never would hide, just, you know, like when a repairman or something comes, she would hide, but not alone, and you have to coax her out. And then, like, one day I went to the bathroom. So it was like in the middle of summer, and you could put your hand like this right over the toilet, and it was ice cold. And then you could pull your hand, and it was fine. And there were no fans, no air conditioning. Like, there was no explanation for why is there a cold spot right over my toilet. Like, and it freaks you out, because I'm like, I'm not sitting there. Like, what? You know, like, is there some kind of entity? Like, why on my toilet? Like, what? So many questions.
Wow.
But yeah, it's just bizarre in a way that you're like, I'll never be able to explain that. I have no idea. All I know is that it happened. Like, I definitely know that it happened, but I don't know what the heck it was.
Did you bring anything home with you from the hospital?
That was my guess. And then, like, and then the ex did that thing that, like, people always do, where they're like, you're not welcome here, you need to move on, and like that, like, classic trope.
Well, he might mean
And
like
then-
an inanimate object, like something you found there.
Like a case file or a electroshock machine, or
not
or
I know of, because I was always like, oh, this stuff has bad energy, let's not take this out of here. But who knows, maybe he had something and I didn't know about it, and that was the problem.
Well,
Wow.
that is a curious story. And what made it stop, or what, did it just kind of peter out after a while, or?
It, like, I thought that it just got lost. I was like, maybe it just got lost or got bored with us, so it moved on. But he said he did that whole, like, you need to move on and all of that, and then it just stopped. But I just and I'm a skeptic too, so I'm not going to be somebody that's like, oh yeah, there's definitely a ghost, or there, but it does bother you in that, like, something definitely happens, and I can't explain it.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how to.
I would be very slow to leap to the conclusion that it was a ghost, but that's the first place people go. I think there must be some other way of looking at it. I don't know what, but I'm just thinking. I'm glad you remain open-minded about what might have caused it.
Yeah,
How
I
about
mean,
you,
I
Jayson?
would be open to anything.
I have never had anything unexplained happen to me that I didn't at least go, I don't know what that was, but I'm sure it was something. Like I disregard things very, very, very easily.
Yeah.
The most that's ever happened to me is when I was in Florida. I saw one of those triangle things in the sky, and it wasn't a kite. And then it wasn't there.
Yeah.
That's it though. But
That's
I don't
how you
know.
were abducted.
That's right. And I lost an hour, but whatever,
Yeah.
that happens.
That's why you have no memory.
That's right. They took my memory part of my brain. But it's interesting what you said about the mental hospital abandoned, because I filmed a movie called Cthulhu Chronicles, and we filmed it in the Brandon abandoned mental hospital, and they left everything there. There were like wheelchairs and
Weird.
gurneys, and it was like so bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
What are you going to do with that stuff, though? Really? I mean,
Yeah,
part it
but-
away and throw it in a landfill. Or, yeah.
Yes.
Wait, are you talking about the place that had been the tuberculosis sanatorium?
I don't know what I had heard mental hospital, but it could have been just the hospital, I suppose. But we found like a doll, and I mean, it couldn't get creepier. But
Yeah, the dolls are creepy.
yeah,
Not as
Yeah.
creepy as clowns, but
no, no, clowns sell books. Hey, and publishers are kind of like clowns, but no. Yeah. Sorry, I had to go and check on Luke. That's where I went.
No, we carried on. We thought we had said something that frightened you or offended you.
Yeah, I'm out of here. I get frightened very easily and offended.